when you reel and you speak and people are feeling your shit.
Alright, ladies and gents, let's kick this shit. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. Hi, how you doing? I am your host this evening. I am GeoQuester, also known as Jeff. I am a game master and game designer. I do a lot of streaming utilizing Fantasy Grounds, and you have come to watch Legends and Lore this evening. Along with me this evening, to my left, is my partner both in the stream and in life, the lovely and ever impressive, the mistress of dorkness herself, the Susie Q.
No, please, stop. Don't go on. No, seriously, go on. Tell them how awesome I really am.
Alright, yeah. Don't think so. Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome all of you to our third episode for Season 4 of 2018 of Legends and Lore. We have been doing, kind of by design, a little bit of a introduction to how to create a campaign, how to make adventures, how to do all the rest of these things. And after last week's episode about newbie GMs and newbie adventures and how to possibly do scratch adventures, we had a flood of requests to say, hey Geo, hey Susie Q, how the hell do we make a scratch adventure? A scratch adventure, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is creating an adventure all by yourself, not using anything pre-made, just going, opening the DMG, the Monster Manual, the PHB, and making your own. So, before we get into all that, which, get out your pen and paper, get your, your clips ready, because we have a shit ton of information to be passing on to you today. But, before we do that, let's get into a few announcements. First off, opening this last weekend was the open call for GMs for Gen Con 2018 in August. So any ladies and gentlemen who wish to go ahead and join Gen Con, please be sure to do so as quickly as possible. Go ahead and get signed up to be a GM. They're always desperate for GMs because we're talking like the largest gaming convention in the world at Gen Con in Indianapolis, Indiana. So please, GMs from around the world, get your asses over there. Let's get to this. Second of all, we have a few other conventions going on in the very near future. They are in person and they are also face-to-face. If I can get to my schedule.
Yep.
Let's see. We have Galaxy Fest, February 9th to February 11th. And we have Genghis Khan, February 16th to February 18th.
Oh, we also have Con on the Cob coming up, as well as the one that's up in Geneseo.
Running Gag.
Running Gag, yes. If you can get to Geneseo College, Running Gag will be taking place, I believe, at the last weekend of this month.
It's either last weekend of this month or the second week of February. I cannot remember which. Also, coming up, the FGC is sponsoring something they're calling the Mapinar, with multiple special cartography guests on Sunday, January 28th at noon Eastern.
Okay, I have the information for Running Gag. Running Gag will be January 26th to January 28th at SUNY Geneseo. For those of you who don't know what SUNY is, it's State University of New York at Geneseo. If you can get your butts there, get your butts there.
Yep, be sure to tell them that Jeff and Susie sent you. They're old friends of ours. We've known them and gamed with them for years and years and years. But, okay, so back to the Mapinar. Okay, so the Mapinar is Sunday, the 28th of January at noon Eastern. Lots and lots of cartography guests. A few people you may have heard of, a few people you may not have heard of, but there is, let's see, Elven Tower is going to be there, Zovia Maps is going to be there, Dyson Logos is going to be there. I'm going to be there as a special guest. Surprise, surprise. I'm a game designer. I'm not a cartographer. I just do this shit as a hobby. So yeah, that's what we've got going on there. And then we also have on Sunday, February 18th, sponsored by Fantasy Grounds College, we have Couples in Gaming, a seminar about couples that do gaming together. So be sure to check that out. Susie Q and myself are going to be special guests there, along with, I cannot remember their names, from Encounter Roleplay. They're going to be there, plus a couple of FGC couples are going to be there. So it promises to be a lot of fun there. Alrighty, now before I really start getting into the nitty-gritty of it, first off, there's no Delvers this week. We have no Delvers Society this week because Junior and his wrestling team was invited to go to sectionals for wrestling. So I will be at sectionals all day tomorrow. And then Thursday, he has a dual meet here at home, so I will be at that instead. So lots and lots. Oh, Will and Sydney, thank you very much, Raz. Yeah, so we have lots and lots of sports stuff going on here this week, and I just wouldn't, was going to pull my hair out if I was going to try to figure out how to schedule everything. So unfortunately, Delvers had to give, so that way I could go watch my son wrestle. It's his last year as a senior, so that's what I wanted to do. All right, so what we're going to do today is going to be a little different than what we normally do. We are going to save all the questions. So if you have a question about today's topic, which is the 12-step path of adventure design, if you have any questions, we're going to save them all to the end after the presentation, because this is a full-on presentation, like slideshows and shit. So you all should like this one quite a bit. If you have a question, PM Susie Q either in Discord or here in Twitch. She will be interjecting a couple of questions and stuff as we go along and we chit-chat. But just go ahead and, we'll save all the questions. Just keep going. If you have something, just be sure to, send it over to her. She'll ask us towards the end. And we'll go through all the information then. Alrighty. So, as a preface to our slideshow, let me tell you a little bit about stuff. First of all, I'm a game designer. I've been a game designer since 2001. Professional game designer. Which means A, I've been paid, B, I work for real companies, and C, I actually have my name on physical books out there in the world. I've got 20 some odd books or something like that. If you want to figure out what my credits are and everything like that, and the fact that I'm not just shooting this out of my ass, then please by all means join my Discord and take a look at Who is Geo. That's one of the channels, and it'll give you a list of all my credits and everything else I've done. So I'm not just talking out my ass. I actually kind of do know what I'm talking about. Second of all, today's thing that we're talking about is called the 12-step path of adventure design. What it does is it's utilizing a book from 1949 is when it was originally written, so well before gaming was ever even a thought. But it was written back in 1949 by a guy by the name of Joseph Campbell. He wrote something called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And a Hero of a Thousand Faces is a examination of mythology and cultural stories and modern media up to that time period, and what makes a hero's journey. Many of you may have heard of it called The Hero's Journey. From their humble beginnings straight through to their ultimate, final goal or their final transition that they go through. And so what we're going to do is I've used this in some of my adventure designs, and many other people have used it as well. And we use a kind of a caveat around our house. If it's good enough for Star Wars, if it's good enough for Indiana Jones, if it's good enough for Harry Potter, then it's good enough for our adventures at home. Whether you're going to be a published adventurer, or it's going to be just a private adventure that you're going to run for a few friends, they're all the same techniques. Now, we've talked about, how to write something in 3 acts, where you have a beginning, the middle portion, and the conclusion. We will wrap the 12-step path into those 3 acts at the end of our little presentation. So, all right. Let's start it up. Right here is the 12th step path of adventure design. It's this big circle. It is not what you would call linear. It is something that happens over and over and over again. It goes in cycles. Whenever we start an adventure, whenever we end an adventure, even the little pieces inside our adventures can follow this wheel that we have going on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start right off with it and see what we got. Now, step 1 on our path. Step 1 is called the ordinary world. This is where everything is normal, common, and boring. This is where the players are sitting down, they're waiting for the adventure to begin. Either their characters were just created, or they've been on other adventures, and now this is they're coming to the end of the downtime in between adventures. It's considered to be the safe time. This is when they're in a city. This is when they're at the farmer's market and they're watching little halfling children run around and play, and everything is normal and happy and healthy for them. Now, if we refer back to last week, when all of you helped me make a very fast adventure about the chicken being stolen by kobolds, we're going to use that as our continuing example today, and we're going to write our adventure using the 12-step path. So, the first part of this would be, you're sitting in a tavern when? We get to step 2, the call to adventure. Now, this is the plot hook. This is the thing that we're going to be throwing out to the players and explaining why they want to do something. This is why they want to go on an adventure. They don't want to be bored. They don't want to sit around. They don't want to have that average, everyday, provincial life, to quote, Beauty and the Beast. They want to be adventurers. They want fame and fortune and glory. These are the kinds of things they want. So, in this case, a farmer from down the dell, blood dripping from a wound above his eye, yelling, "They stole me prized chicken!" comes running into the bar. Now, most players would find that to be a little cliche, but at the same time, cliche is cliche for a reason. It's been used because these tropes have been used in the past, and we enjoy utilizing these tropes because they work. So that is the call to adventure, is somebody stole my chicken. That leads us to step 3, refusing the call. Now, refusing the call is where the players kind of look over at the farmer and are like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care about your damn chicken. But that's where you start baiting the players. You can bait the players by giving them extra pieces of information, tie in a little bit of their backstory from their characters into the situation that's currently happening. But it's all very touch and go. It's give and take. This is where you get to role play with the characters. You get to play with the players, and you get to see how they're reacting to things, and you get to kind of play on them. Now, some of them will eat it with a spoon. They're bored. They want to go on adventures. They're bored. Others, they want a reward of some kind. Hey, you better tell me what I'm getting out of this.
I want the loots.
Yes, I want the loots. And finally, then you got the other characters who want to be included. It has to have a reason, like deep down in their heart of hearts, why they became a hero. So in a simple line like, if you can find my Camilla, I'll give you each one of her golden eggs. Please help me. The old farmer looks at you with pleading eyes, much like your mother did when you left home a few months ago. So in that simple line, you've actually wrapped in many, many different plot hooks for many different types of characters, so they can go ahead and all feel like they have a reason to go on this adventure, whether it's greed or glory or personal justice, which are, by the way, the 3 most key motivators in any character story. Then it catches all 3 of those things. Now, this leads us to step 4. The characters have left the tavern, they've left their quiet, humdrum little town, and they are beginning the adventure. Now, it's still in what we would consider to be the ordinary world, quote-unquote, the ordinary world. This is the boring world, the world that they know day to day. Everybody knows them from day to day in this world. Now, during this time period is usually when they meet a mentor. Now, this mentor can be something supernatural. It could be a druid who steps out of a tree. It could be the crazy old man who's going to teach them kung fu in the future. It could be anybody. But the rule for this is that this person should be a helper. This one is going to help them reach their goals ultimately. And doesn't always necessarily need to be overt. This character, this NPC, could be someone who initially stands in the way of the player characters. Somebody who requires them to pass a test or answer questions in order to, satisfy some inner desire that character has, some motivational need, so that way the story is advanced. And in this case, an old man sitting on a rock by the side of the road looks up from his pipe and laughs at you. Now, we've all seen that old man, whether it's Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, or Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars, or Dumbledore from Harry Potter. The mentor is always there to help the hero on their journey. Now, before we start crossing over, let me explain what you see here on your screen. You see at the top, you see something called the ordinary world, and you see at the bottom, the supernatural world. You also see the fact that some of the circles are different colors than others. The ordinary world is the boring, the humdrum. The supernatural world is the world of adventure. It's where the average human being stops. This person will not go any further. They will turn back by now. Any other farmer in town is like, fuck Camilla, we can always find another chicken. Maybe not one that lays a golden egg, but we can always find another damn chicken. We do not need to go running around and getting ourselves killed. Because by now the characters have probably had at least one other encounter. Not anything lethal yet, but something to kind of allude to the fact that they're on a dangerous road. And this is where we reach step 5, crossing the threshold. This is where the players go from being ordinary to being supernatural. This is where they cross over that boundary to leave the Shire behind in order to go off and find, go burn the One Ring in Mordor. Or they leave, Privet Drive to go to Hogwarts. This is the time they leave that ordinary world behind. That's the world of being safe and soft and normal and everyday to something dangerous and mysterious and unknown. In the case of our little adventure here, ahead, the farmer's fields are trampled and burned. Dead sheep and goats drench the yard in blood. Finally, we are now in the supernatural world. This is where the path of trials, step 6, begins. Now, the path of trials can follow so many different routes in this one. It could be death trap dungeons, it can be the cave with falling boulders or full of monsters, it could be the dark and forbidding forest, it can be multiple different things. But these encounters and these elements that you're utilizing should always be alluding to what the finale is going to be. For example, in our story right now from last week that we had and what we're building, this narrative that we're building right now, we know as the writers of this that we know that we have kobolds that stole the chicken. Now, during this path of trials, the players can meet additional allies. They can meet additional enemies. They can follow red herrings. For example, the Goblin Cave. They may mistake the footprints that they found and they go to a Goblin Cave. Well, while there, a sniveling little goblin is able to convince the players that he may know where the chicken is and saw kobolds running off with it, and will lead them to tracks to be able to find it. So in our narrative, though difficult, you followed the faint tracks from the farm through the dark wood, and finally we get to step 7. Now, in mythology and literature, what's called approaching the innermost cave. The innermost cave, like for example in Star Wars, in the original Star Wars trilogy, the innermost cave is where Luke Skywalker was on Dagobah, and he goes into the cave and he sees Darth Vader's apparition, and he cuts it down and then sees his own face behind Darth Vader's mask. That is the innermost cave. Harry Potter in the Sorcerer's Stone. The innermost cave is when he was lost and looking and longing at the mirror. And Dumbledore comes up to him and explains to him, hey, look, you know, some people can get lost here. So this is usually where the mentor would step in to help guide the characters to go in the right direction. And in this case, the trail leads into what looks like the ruins of an ancient castle. The stench of stale urine and blood permeates the unnaturally cold air. So now the characters have met this area. They know at this point that they have reached the destination that they're looking for. They understand that this is the destination. Okay, the chicken must be here. So we will move on to step 8. The ordeal. Every encounter thus far has been leading to this moment. This is considered to be a quote-unquote a soft climax of the story, where the characters get to meet some sort of faceless antagonist for the first time. This antagonist, for example, in Harry Potter, this antagonist would be Snape. This antagonist would be whatever villain of the week, quote-unquote, it was inside Harry Potter. For example, Professor Quirrell, who was the enemy and the villain for the first one. Doesn't necessarily mean that that is the final ultimate bad guy. This is why it's called a soft climax. It does not have to be the end of the story for the adventurers here. This could be a sub-boss, if you want to use the parlance from MMOs. It could be a sub-boss that you're going to be, trying to bring life to. And in the case of our narrative, wading through the cold, trap-filled rooms of the ruined castle, finally, you can see there's a light up ahead. Bathed in the icy blue light is the form of a small, lizard-like humanoid holding a staff.
You shall not pass!
Exactly. And so our kobold sorcerer is going to sit there, and he is going to attempt to stop the characters. Low-level characters fighting a kobold sorcerer, possibly a couple of minions or other underlings in there. Maybe the room has some traps in it that the kobold sorcerer has already laid. So he's going to try to utilize the hazards and the terrain inside his special quote-unquote boss room in order to thwart the character, or thwart our players from being able to defeat him. But ultimately, they win. And by winning, they get to go to step 9, which is called Seizing the Sword. Now, we've seen Seizing the Sword in, for example, the Mort d'Arthur. We've seen Seizing the Sword in things like Harry Potter, where he gets the Sorcerer's Stone, or, etc., etc., etc. There are so many locations where we can seize the sword. Now is a good time to give the characters their rewards. They can, they should believe that they have reached the end. They should believe they've conquered the dungeon. And the sword, in this instance, is what we would call, in literary terms, something called a MacGuffin, or an object of a quest. It is the MacGuffin. In the case of our narrative, with the kobold sorcerer vanquished, you hear a soft clucking coming from behind a small mound of gold and trinkets. Thank you, Susie. And that leads to the road back. Now, going somewhere is only half the journey. Coming home is the other half. Now, the road back in step 10, the road back is a ruse on the part of our author or of our GM. This is meant to make the players feel comfortable. Once again, they're beginning to journey back from the supernatural, back to the ordinary. They've learned lessons. They've experienced things. They've grown in power. They have rewards. They are wiser and more powerful now than when they initially set off on their adventure. So at this point, they should believe they are done. They should be talking about things like, when I get back to the tavern, and in our narrative, by the time you reach the edge of the ruins, a gentle snow begins to fall. In places, small drifts have already begun. It'll be a good night of ale, food, tales, and a warm fire back at the tavern. Camilla, the chicken, clucks softly in her cage. At something like this, and Susie's giving me the weirdest look right now because she wants to cluck more. In a moment like this, the characters should be like, okay, we go home. Very few encounters should happen on the way home. Maybe some hungry wolves, maybe a little seed for a future adventure, but for the most part, the player should be relatively unmolested on the way home. That is until after they've crossed over the boundary from the supernatural back to the ordinary. They've gotten back into those farming lands, and now we reach step 11. The resurrection. The resurrection is where the supernatural world now comes and intrudes on the ordinary world. This is where the unknown boss, or one from someplace earlier in the venture, comes back after its defeat, and now is after the player characters and attempts to ambush them, attempts to beat them that one final time. The resurrection happens in all sorts of different things, but in this case, you hear a faint whoosh passing overhead. Suddenly, an unearthly roar shatters the calm night, transforming the blood in your veins to ice. A dragon is attacking. So in the case of our kobolds, their dragon, who happens to be a white dragon, that's why it's so cold outside, and you have been alluding to throughout many of these steps, has swooped down on the player characters because it wants its gold egg-laying chicken. It wants Camilla for its own, and to add the eggs that Camilla lays to its hoard. After battling the dragon, we come to our final step, step 12, Return with the Elixir. Now, that's the title of it from Hero of a Thousand Faces, but this is where the characters return, finally, triumphant, back to the ordinary world as heroes. This is where they complete their quest. This is a great place to throw in their downtime. This is a great place for them to get their rewards. This is also a great place to set any additional hooks for future adventures you want to run. And in this case, the old man from the road looks up from his mug of ale by the fire. A dragon, you say? He smiles. Well then, if you fancy yourselves heroes, I may have just the job for you. So that's basically the 12 steps. You can utilize them in any way you wish. But, as we've all seen, you can do this in cycles. As, you know, the 12th step here being, I have a job for you, leads back into the ordinary world, leads back to the call to adventure, leads back, and it just keeps it going in a cycle. Now, what if you want to do one-shot adventures, or you want to do something a little bit more linear? How do we write it in 3 acts? Well, that's where we do the path in 3 acts. The path in 3 acts breaks things down, and as you can see by our bar, it breaks things down into workable chunks, things that we can use. As you can see, Act 2 is the largest part of everything. Act 1 is a little small, Act 3 is a little bit larger because it may have some ultimate conclusions that you want to be reaching. But, for the most part, your first 5 steps, or 4.5, because crossing the threshold could actually go into Act 2 as well. But for your first 4.5 to 5 steps, that's all going to be Act 1. It's very quick, very easy, more role-playing than anything else. Act 2 is exploration and encounters. This is your second and third pillar of role-playing, is your encounters and all of your exploration. This is where the predominantly all happens, with the path of trials, approaching the innermost cave, your ordeal, and then finally your reward. That all comes into Act 2. And then finally, as you go from Act 2 and kind of move into Act 3 by using Step 10, the road back, you go to the resurrection, which is going to be your final conclusive, ultimate hard climax, is what we call those. And then finally returning with the elixir, and possibly setting up something for the future. That is how we do it, going from the ordinary world to the supernatural world, and then back again to the ordinary world. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the 12-step path and how to do it in 3 acts. If you have any questions, please be sure to PM Miss Susie Q. And Susie Q, do we have any questions?
I have nothing yet.
We have no questions. That is not a surprise.
Nope. It's all good.
Awesome. I mean, I do have some questions that are here. I can kind of read them off.
Okay.
Let's see. Questions. What is step 1? What is step 2? Yeah, that's funny. Jackass. I saw another one up in here. These slides will be for sale in the lobby after the show. No, they will not be. However, these slides and this presentation that you just watched was created by something called Prezi. Prezi, from Prezi.com. It's a free, something free that you can utilize. It just does slideshows and presentations and stuff like that. I use it a lot when I was in college. My son utilizes it a lot for his high school work and his college work. So it's something that we use to do illustrations. But if anybody has questions, please, by all means, let's do some questions. If not, this is going to be a short show.
Well, we could always... I haven't done Mistress's Dungeon in a while.
Do you have something for the Mistress's Dungeon tonight?
I kind of do.
And what do you have for the Mistress's Dungeon? Do I need to get my finger over the censor button ready?
You just might. All right. My pet peeve for this Mistress's Dungeon...
You want to know what really grinds my gears?
Yeah, exactly. So, what really grinds my gears are GMs that do not read the stuff before they play.
Oh God, yes. Preach on!
Alright, we gonna get to preaching here now, peeps. Get your good books out. Raise your hands to the sky, to the DM gods, because we about to roll this thing. So my big bitch is, and this has been my bitch for years now. Every once in a while, I get that GM. You all know the ones I'm talking about. They don't read the damn module before they run it. Y'all, I cannot stand this. If you're not familiar with it, that's fine. Whatever, as long as you've read through it. It's the ones that don't read through it. They have no fucking idea what's coming up next. And they harsh my vibe. They ruin my immersion, y'all. Ruin my immersion. Now, I've run into these GMs quite a bit. I'm about to slap the shit out of all of them. I see any one of you fuckers out there running a game without having read that goddamn module first. I swear to God, I will rain holy hell down upon your game, especially if I'm in it. Don't do that shit. Okay. That is the end of my Mistress's Dungeon. Basically, if you're a GM, new, old, somewhere in between, it really doesn't matter. Read the fucking module before you run the damn thing. I'm not reading it before I play it, so that means I have no clue what's going on. If you as my GM don't know what's going on, we gonna have just a little bit of an issue here.
And we do have a question. What is the source of the 12-step path of adventure design? Is there a place where you can read more? Yes. The 12-step path of adventure design is based on The Hero of a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. It was originally written in 1949 as a study on mythology and cultural stories and how they make specific elements to create the hero's journey, going from the ordinary world to the supernatural world, and how they change throughout the course of the literary arc. And adventure game designers utilize it to write their stories as well, because after all, an adventure is a story. You're telling a story. And to make it a believable story, there are certain little tricks you can use, and one of them is using the 12-step path, also known as the hero's journey. So definitely go look for a copy of it. I believe the 3rd edition printing of it was done in 2008. My copy is from 1949. I am old, so therefore I like old things. But that's it. It's a Hero of a Thousand Faces. It's a absolutely fantastic book. And I can't stress enough how good it is to use in any sort of adventure design. Whether it is a short one-shot or it is a long campaign, you can use it. Everything is cyclical. And, I mean, hell, if it was good enough for Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, etc., 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 if it's good enough for those things, then it is good enough for our home adventures.
Exactly. And sometimes the old stuff is better than some of the new stuff.
I know, I'm old, so therefore I'm better than the new.
This is very true. I don't think I could deal with someone who was younger.
I couldn't keep up. I'd have a heart attack by like day 2. But all right, so to go back to what Susie Q was saying about preparation. Now I preach about this. I've preached about it for 3 seasons of this show already, and I guess I'll preach about it a little bit more. You cannot be over prepared as a GM. You can't. It just doesn't happen. You can most certainly be underprepared. If you're stopping a game for 15, 20, half an hour, whatever, because you didn't read ahead, or you don't understand a rule, or you just don't get it, then by all means, you need to stop running a game, you need to go read, and you need to stop running for a while. But to defend GMs, okay, there are some GMs out there who run shit tons of stuff. They can't remember everything at all times. Okay, I do understand this. This happens, especially with the virtual, especially with the virtual tabletop stuff. Virtual tabletop does not lend itself to easy reading. And if you only utilize virtual tabletops and you don't have an actual physical copy or even a PDF copy of something in front of you, you can't really get the context of what you're supposed to be getting.
All right, my virtual GMs, I get it. No, I get it, because I do have, like, you and Rob and a couple of my other GMs. You guys run a shit ton of games throughout the week. I get that. I got no issues with that. No, what I'm talking about is the dipshits that go out, they buy the module, they have it right in front of them, hard copy. Decide they're not even going to open that box, not even cut the plastic on that box
until they're sitting down to play the game. I understand. Well, see,
those are the ones I have an issue with.
We had a joke about this. We had a joke about this when in the early sessions of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, when we started playing Yawning Portal, was that like, for example, Doug, who is the president of SmartWorks, the owners of Fantasy Grounds, he was like, I didn't prepare anything. I'm just, experiencing this as we're going through it, just like you guys, and I'm reading ahead like one encounter kind of thing. And we all laughed and joked and tee-heed about it and everything like that. But we were all skilled enough game masters that we were able to do stuff like that. We could do those things. But now here's my defense for the GMs. Not so much, don't prep because you're busy. That's a bullshit excuse, because if you're that busy you can't prep for one game, you're that busy you can't prep for any of the games, therefore all of your games are going to suck ass. But here's my defense. If the players want the GM to be prepared, the GM should ask the players to be prepared, to understand their character, to understand the abilities and limitations of their characters, and it's not, that far gone to ask the GM to say, hey, look, I'm going to be running the game. I got to keep everything, all the moving parts behind the screen going. Can you please just keep your character going? So if you have to stop the game as a player every time it becomes your turn or whatever, or you're sitting there dead silent staring at your phone, then that's a faux pas. You should be ready when it becomes your turn to say, I want to do this. And you shouldn't have moments of silence. I mean, a short moment of silence as people are shocked or trying to think of what, new thing, just, new hellhole of doom just popped up in front of them. Those kinds of things, yeah, I get it. But you shouldn't, during a role-playing situation where it's just banter and talk and stuff like that, you should have responses. Your characters would have responses. If I was talking to you outside of game, we would have responses for each other. So therefore, everybody should have a response of some kind. And keep those moments of silence down. Keep the game moving. Keep the flow moving. That's important. That's, once again, why we have the 12-step path, is so we keep everything rolling along and not being bogged down by indecision and not knowing. So, and that's on both the GM and the players. Alrighty, so ladies and gentlemen, quick couple of shout outs. Once again, I'd like to thank Fantasy Grounds College. They are a non-for-profit organization that helps teach people how to use Fantasy Grounds, the virtual tabletop software that we all know and love so much. They are not affiliated with Smiteworks or Fantasy Grounds in any way. They're just a bunch of people who really love the program and wanted to make sure everybody out there had the opportunity of being able to use it and use it properly. So if you have yet to figure out how to use it, head on over to fantasygroundscollege.net. They have plenty of classes scheduled. It's entirely free, just takes a little bit of time, and you'll get used to utilizing the program with them. I also like to thank the Blackmore Society. The Blackmore Society helps set up special guests, special games, conventions, and all sorts of other things, connecting the virtual world with the real world. And I'd like to thank them, especially Casey Rift, for making sure everything has been set up for these conventions that are coming up. I'd like to thank Smiteworks. Smiteworks are the creators of Fantasy Grounds, and they have tons and tons and tons of stuff coming out, and it's absolutely beautiful. I love looking at all of it. I love the virtual tabletop itself. There's plenty of things out there. If you're looking for a game, be sure to jump over to the Fantasy Grounds official Discord or to their official forums on fantasygrounds.com. They have links to everything over there. FG Days, by the way, is coming up on the 20th of January. So that is a singular one-day online virtual convention where they utilize Fantasy Grounds and they run all sorts of games. Be sure to jump over there and check it out. I'd also like to thank our other sponsor, which is Dolman Creative Studios. Dolman Creative Studios made Destiny 6, the role-playing game, which is a D6 game. Wonderful game. And other than that, I do believe I am just about done for chit-chatting today. It looks like it's a short episode. No questions. So either I thoroughly explained everything that people wanted me to explain, or everybody is still writing stuff down and not messaging.
Oh.
So, alrighty. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're all done. So, for myself, for Miss Susie Q, for everybody here at GeoQuester Gaming, I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by. If you want to support the channel, you can either join us on Patreon, you can throw us a donation, you can throw cheers at us, or you can go over to the DM's Guild and purchase the Not Really Complete Tome of Spells, which has over 450 spells coded into it, for Fantasy Grounds for 5th edition. It's only $5. So myself and Jessica, the co's, we would greatly appreciate all that. But other than that, I think we're all done for tonight, and we'll be seeing everybody again on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. when we have episode 2 of Dragon Mountain.
Yep. See you later, guys.
Alrighty, everybody have a great day.